stream. Alright. Usually YouTube is just a little bit behind. So hopefully... Alright, let's see. Can you hear yourself? Alright. Just need to make sure that you're... Okay, I can't hear you on the YouTube stream. Why is that? Trying to turn you up a little bit. Yep, still can't hear. How do I do that? This usually is like the biggest thing that takes the most time. See, I had the same problem when I had Strahd and yeah, I had him and Aaron Tate on. We did like just a small little, just like trying to make sure everything was figured out, and it always is a pain. Let me see here. So I'm trying to take this and bring it over here. Yeah, exactly. And that's like the worst part. You think they would have like a test run feature thing where like it would make sense, but they sure are. Let me see if I can move this.
Speak? Say something? Does it go? Are we good? Oh?
Never been easier.
Testing. Sometimes you just...
Alright, so in chapter...
It would be nice if everything just started working perfectly and we could just go into it.
I'm trying to take this and bring it over here.
So, always so difficult.
Alright, so in chapter...
It would be nice if everything
All
just
right,
started
are we
working
good?
perfectly. Let's go. Perfect. All right. Awesome. Okay. Mhm. Spiral. Oh, you're muted. It says you're muted. I'm sorry. Well, yeah, that's what. Oops. Sorry, guys. Oh,
That
are you
should be
Gucci?
should be
Perfect.
it.
Okay.
We'll find out here in a second.
We could just go into it.
Hold on, let's see if it caught up.
It says you're muted. I'm sorry. Oh. Well, yeah, that's what. Making sure. Oops. Sorry, guys.
Let's see if that worked. I'm watching the
Oh.
stream just to make sure. That
Are you
should be
Gucci?
okay. Yep. should be
Perfect.
it.
Okay. Good. Okay.
All right. So, but basically, so I went down and I was like, okay, so if Mother Nature is basically cursing these people that have these dreams and desires, it reminded me almost a lot of like the Garden of Eden and like those who want that knowledge and basically wanted to further themselves through dreams or desires. You know, they were looked at as like terrible for doing so, and they were cast out of the Garden of Eden. And I was like, that could be almost similar to the ancient kingdom. The ancient kingdom was almost like they flew too close to the sun. They had too big of dreams, too big of ambitions, and it got to the point where they got into, and that's probably where the origin of devil fruit came from, was the ancient kingdom, I'd imagine. And now they've just gotten to the point now where they're like commonplace. But then I thought, I'm like, so who was the enemy of the ancient kingdom, right? Who hated the ancient kingdom so much? And I was like, oh my God, it's Eem. What if Eem is actually just like an embodiment of Mother Nature? And I was like, I don't know if they would have like a devil fruit that would give them that ability to just basically be the embodiment of Mother Nature. But if you're around for that long, and we think that Eem obviously has started from, you know, before the Void Century, you know, and that person would make so much sense. And what did they do? They created a structure underneath them that was supposed to maintain order and almost like crush people's dreams. Like the world government is very well known for doing that. And so it's like, is Mother Nature scorned that much by people trying to will themselves to do more, that it's cracking down the best way it knows how by creating a structure in which it constantly is crushing those dreams to make sure that people stay in that line?
I see where you're coming from. Okay. I'm catching on right now. So, very interesting thing, specifically about the panel that you're talking about, is that Vegapunk specifically says at the bottom, it doesn't matter if you believe in a god or not. And I think it's really interesting because back in Skypiea, which obviously has like every single lore and tie to what's happening in current One Piece, Zoro had constantly said that he doesn't believe in God. And Chopper was like, oh, you don't believe in God. Which back then, because they were talking about like God so much and kind of throwing the term around, almost seemed like at some point there could have been a God. And then also, if you're looking at Kuma's Bible, there is a picture of a woman on it. On the Bible, a picture of a woman with Skypiean wings all around the side. So I think, is there a God? The God would have to be the Mother Sea or Mother Nature, something along those lines, because that's what we're actually seeing within One Piece. The god would also probably have to be Skypiean, because it's a little crazy that we're going to see Skypiean wings on a Bible and there isn't going to be this connection. So I think that that's also really interesting, to the point where it could be Eem, I think you're spot on. If you're actually looking at Eam and looking at the design of Emu, number one, Emu backwards is Umi, which is C. Mother C, we can make that connection there. A really interesting thing to note is actually, if you look at the High Priestess card, which is a tarot card,
Yeah.
the design of Eam is almost exactly identical. Which is interesting because the High Priestess basically symbolizes a lot of the same things that Emu could kind of fit into that role. So I do think you're spot on, especially with the biblical references in One Piece. In my theory vid that I did, I went over a lot of like the biblical references in One Piece and how much, specifically with Adam and Eve and in the Old Testament, there are a lot of references. Oh, hello everybody reading the chat. We do have some awesome people in the chat right now,
Yeah,
which is
we
great.
do.
Awesome.
We got my boy Zach. He's actually the one who designed my logo for me.
Oh, word. Awesome.
And messy hair guy, he's always doing something crazy, especially
he's
on the DDTs.
he's always
I did not
great.
read the spoilers, so I usually like to stay spoiler free.
I did read the spoilers. I read every single one of them, but we won't talk about them on this stream. But the spoilers are really good. One Piece is going absolutely nutty right now. But yeah, to your point that there is some sort of like opposing force in the world that has been continuously going against like the creation of devil fruits specifically, I think you're right. I'm gonna take Vegapunk's theory at face value, like honestly, because number one, that's the smartest man in the world. He has the most knowledge about devil fruits, has access to ancient technology, and has a mind that can take infinite amount of information. So if we're taking this along the lines of that, I feel like the only conclusion is there's some sort of person who dislikes devil fruits.
Yeah, I mean, and it would make sense, right? That it would be Eam over anybody else, and like, what's crazy is, so I originally, when I saw what happened to Lelucia, I was immediately like, okay, this person is using an ancient weapon. But if we think about Mother Nature and how she's able to affect, basically everything that is, I mean, you would be able to control the weather. So if you're able to basically just make a focal point being a singular island, and if you wanted to whip up a storm that would immediately obliterate that island because they were doing something that went against Mother Nature, I mean, it would be so simple to have that happen. And what another thing that I also find very interesting is inside Pangea Castle, when she's walking around, it's all overgrown, as if nature is just running its course where she's at. So it's like, it's literally like, I mean, usually like when you see the other places in Marie-Joie, you see like everything is really nicely kept. They have slaves under the walkways that are moving people and stuff like that. Like everything is really well kept for the celestial dragons. So why wouldn't it be the same for the like the top of the totem pole? So I was just thinking,
and the garden too. Like the garden underneath Marie-Joie is kind of suspicious, especially if you're looking at it in terms of why is there this garden filled with light under Marie-Joie? Most notably because that looked like artificial light. I don't know if you've noticed in One Piece, but the majority of the light either comes from like weird objects or candlelight. Like there isn't actually electricity. Like there's very few things that actually run on electricity. The only things that don't run on like those other things run on like Coca-Cola power or like fuel gasoline. So like oil lamps and stuff. Like everything else runs basically on coal. Like there isn't electricity. So the fact that there is some sort of like artificial light source underneath there that is basically looks like a sun kind of leads me to believe that there might be some semblance of the tree of Eve there, like the Eve tree, because that's the same thing in Fishman Island that gives them artificial sunlight, which would also then reference back to Garden of Eden, biblical references, all that sort of good stuff.
yeah, and to actually speak on that a little bit more too, that was another thing that I thought of was, we know, like, if there was this force of nature that was literally just against people's freedoms, and they wanted to basically put people in their place. I mean, who do you think could sink an entire island and put them underwater besides for a force of nature like that?
Yeah.
Like, that would be the ultimate way to do that. And like, I even thought about some similar things when it comes to like, we know that Jaya was the shape of a skull at one point, but it's obviously changed over time because different pieces have, got hit by the knockup stream, and some people believe that they've gone other places. Some people think that a part of Jaya's original skull shape was where Laugh Tale is. People have these thoughts and things like that, and some people even think that like the triangle of Enies Lobby, Marineford, and Impel Down is like an artificial. I mean, it's always light there. So you're right. Like another thing where it's like there's always that artificial
some
light.
artificial light, yeah.
But
which kind of makes sense because the entire One Piece world is really interesting because of the existence of Skypiea and the existence of multiple levels, meaning that there probably isn't an actual sun. Because if you think about it, there'd be no way for sun to reach like certain portions unless there were artificial sources of light in these. You know what? Let me go look up really quick. You keep talking. I want to look up and see if we've actually saw the sun like rise and set on multiple occasions. Give me 1 second.
No, go ahead.
But keep going. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, you're good. So a lot of people also think that the whirlpool that's in between all three of those places is where Laugh Tale might be. Like that, and like or that's where God Valley was. And they, Eam came along and sunk God Valley to the pits of, the depths of water, created a whirlpool around it, and then created this triangle of world government buildings to basically seal off the truth to anybody that's not a Marine. And even Marines don't really dare to go towards that. So it's really interesting because if you take into account that there's this force of nature, everything becomes game. Like there's nothing that's really on the, off the table when it comes to someone that is that strong. Like a force of nature, like we can even look at what we think Dragon to be as far as maybe a Wind Logia or something like that. But even he has just like a fraction of what that Mother Nature can bring. So I wouldn't put it past, God Valley to be under there, and or even under Enies Lobby, where there's just that huge drop off where there's something that could be underneath there, and like nothing really explains it, but there's something, and I think eventually we'll get that information. But it's just really interesting to see all of the things that possibly could happen, and to try and connect the dots with Mother Nature now.
So do you think that Uranus, what is technically that power of Mother Nature, or that technically that ancient weapon could be doing it, or do you think that that's purely like Eam's strength?
At first I thought it was, but I think that it might just be Eam's strength. I think that, and I subscribe to Morge's theory about the ancient weapons. Like, Pluton's like armament hockey, so it's like a weapon of destruction. And Poseidon is like Conqueror's hockey in the way that it subdues sea creatures and they basically bend to Poseidon's will. And then that would make Uranus, it would make that a tool of observation. Which is why I actually thought when Dofi was referring to the treasure in Marijois, he was talking about Uranus. And I think that it makes sense because when Eam went down into like the locked corridor and they saw the big straw hat, I think that was referencing that the Joy Boy was coming. That was like the observation almost of looking into the future and saying, Joy Boy is right around the corner. And I think that's part of why Eam had all those wanted posters. You know, she had Luffy's. She saw the Straw Hat. And there's even an interesting theory. I forget who said it. I feel like it was... I forget which one it was. I absorb so much TikTok and YouTube content. It's hard to keep them all straight. But he said that he believed that the original Joy Boy's name was Jaguar D... what was it? Jaguar D something. And it was like... Jaguar, obviously we know Jaguar D Sol is a D, and he was a giant. And a lot of people think that Joy Boy was originally a giant. So they think that he was originally from the Jaguar line because of his him being a giant, but he was one of the originals. And
so I actually take that in a totally different direction. But you finish first.
But I almost think that that's how it looked for Eam, because Eam was using the observation tool. So what's the best way that Eam would know that Joy Boy is coming? To see the straw hat of the original user that fought Eam. So that would be a giant straw hat. So what did she see? A giant straw hat, to kind of show that that was what was coming. And so that's kind of where I think that's going, and I wouldn't be opposed to that. I think that it makes a lot of sense, but I want to hear your thoughts.
So, on the topic of the ancient weapons, I think that the ancient weapons go as so. One is an external force, that being Pluton, because that is something that is outside the realm of man. One being an internal force, that being Poseidon, because Poseidon is an internal trait. The third one has to be something that combines the internal and the external. And I think that the perfect thing that describes that is a devil fruit, which I think is the one that Emu ate. If you're thinking about it, there are so many traits that are inherent to every species, so it would make sense that Poseidon would be the evolution of those traits. With technology, creation of a warship would be the end result of evolution for Pluton. But because devil fruits are constantly expanding, there has to be something that controls basically everything, that being the force of Mother Nature, that being something that could control something from the skies. That's what I think Uranus is. It is a devil fruit. And I think that it might be one of the reasons why Blackbeard has the Yami Yami no Mi, because it can negate devil fruits. And there has to be a reason that Blackbeard is going after specifically devil fruits, because if he's able to negate certain devil fruits, he would probably be able to negate the most powerful devil fruit. In the narrative of One Piece, there's always been this thing of saying, what's stronger, Haki or devil fruits? I'm going to be honest, I think even though Haki is very strong, against the strongest devil fruit, Haki won't really matter. And I think that Blackbeard secretly knows this. In relation to the Void Century, I think that there were actual multiple D-Clan tribes, because I think that the D-Clan tribes were related to the 12 tribes of Israel, taken back from that Old Testament good stuff. The 12 tribes of Israel, I think that the original Joy Boy was Joseph, the King of Dreams, because as we see, multiple people in One Piece with extraordinary dreams do really good things. Technically, I don't... So I know that people like seeing the giant Joy Boy straw hat and thinking that it's a giant. I'm going to be honest, I just don't think it's big enough. I think that it's smaller. I think that Joy Boy possibly could have been a Lunarian, possibly could have just been a tall person, just because I just don't think that the straw hat is big enough for it to be a giant. But I do think that the descendant of the original Joy Boy is Luffy, because I believe that the original Joy Boy, based on Joseph, King of Dreams, was a dreamer, and who has the biggest dream in One Piece? It's Luffy. I also have this theory that Eam was also a D-Clan member, and that there can technically be two Joy Boys. And me and Larry kind of came up with the same theory right around the same time. I think that there can be like a good version Joy Boy and an evil version Joy Boy. And that basically you can evolve your devil fruit to become Joy Boy, but to be like the Joy Boy 800 years ago, the original Joy Boy that fell, and the last Joy Boy that we had, you have to have the Hito Hito no Mi. Which is why I think that Luffy was able to become Joy Boy, and not specifically just Joy Boy, but the Joy Boy that Zunisha remembers, because he specifically states, oh, that laugh, it brings back memories, as if Zunisha was the one who personally knew Joy Boy, which I also have a theory that Zunisha, like when Zunisha portrayed Joy Boy, it was like a Peter type situation with Jesus, because we see a lot of that symbolism with Jesus, Savior, the Atlas, a lot of stuff like that. So I'm kind of on the same track, but I differ in a couple of those areas.
So I actually like that. I don't know about the Lunarian thing, because I feel like the Lunarian kind of plays into the fact that Joy Boy, well, at least from what we know, when he goes into Gear 5, we see his white hair and stuff like that. So he's very reminiscent of a Lunarian, but he doesn't have wings. But I guess his fruit wouldn't maybe go as far. But I mean, he is a Zoan, so maybe that transformation should be there. So I don't know. But I was thinking, because like, I mean, it's all up to imagination with this fruit. And so like he imagined himself a giant, and then he was a giant. And I was like, when he was giant form, I like looked at him, and maybe it's not super to scale, but I was like, I bet that straw hat would fit on him. I was like, that seems like it would be about right. But I think that he was a giant, and honestly, I have a crazy theory about Zunisha too. But I also think that it was similar to the biblical story, where his betrayal wasn't based upon his own choosing. So like, I don't know if you have like done extensive research on like the missing books of the Bible. Because there's one about Mary, and there's also a book of Judas. And the book of Judas is actually really interesting, because it paints Judas in this light like he didn't want to betray Jesus, but Jesus talked to him and told him that this was the will of his Father, and so he needed to betray him for the prophecy to come true, for everyone's sins to be forgiven. So even though Judas was, racked with guilt after the fact, he never actually wanted to betray Jesus. But Jesus told him that he needed to, for everything to unfold the way it should in fate. And so I think that Zunisha betrayed Joy Boy, but he did it under someone else's accord. Like, it wasn't his own will. And that's where I think Eam is like second to none. And I mean, I don't know if you've ever seen Morge talk about how like he thinks the voice of all things is just like the highest, like it's like a natural born thing, where you're born with this level of observation that is just on a different level.
Mm-hmm.
And so I took it a step further, and I was like, okay, well, if observation has something like that, well, what does armament have? And then I was thinking, and even though it was shown so early, we know that the breath of all things is almost like an armament thing, because it was how Zoro was able to cut Mr. One back all the way in Alabasta. Like, he was basically like, I can either choose to not cut, or I can cut with the breath of all things. So then I was thinking, okay, well, if that is the furthest step, or like one of the things that you have to be born with as far as armament, what would be the furthest extent and something that you have to be born with past conquerors? And I was like, well, it would be really interesting if Eam had this power that I called the command of all things.
Oh, I see what you're getting at.
So I think that what Eam did was Eam used Zunisha by basically taking her will and pushing it into someone to the point where they have to obey, which would make the most sense to me, because Zunisha has literally no ability to do anything else but wander aimlessly throughout the entire new world. Like, that's and like the only time that Zunisha was able to even defend himself was when Momonosuke gave him permission to attack Jack back. Like, Jack was hitting him and like destroying his legs, and he couldn't do a single thing until Momonosuke gave him the order. And I think Momonosuke might have that hidden innate ability as well. So that's where I kind of like, I'm like, wow.
I like that. I like that a lot. I'm going to be honest. I totally forgot about the Breath of all things because you're right. It was all the way back in Alabaster. And some people could even say, well, that's just something that a sword skill. But if we're actually looking at the voice of all things, like, it's kind of weird that there's like the same verbiage being used, which kind of leads me to believe like there could definitely be something like that. Also, if we're looking back to Skypiea, which is like the foundation of all lore in One Piece, like the way that gods were portrayed, and specifically the Enel cover story in which Enel, who was called God and had this title, was able to basically control soldiers and bring them back to life. It would make sense that there's some sort of like the breath of all things, the voice of all things, like the conquerors or the control of all things, or something along those lines, which I think would also be really interesting because it would make sense why the world government follows the orders of the celestial dragons and why the Gorosei follow the order of Imu. Because at some point we have to know, well, the Gorosei are 5 people, all of them have scars, all of them probably have battle experience, they have these entire armies. Why aren't they just taking this person out? Like, there should be some sort of power struggle at some point, right? Unless they physically can't go against Eames' will, which I think is also really interesting because with Zoan Awakenings, we know that certain Zoans will take over the user completely and put their own will basically into them. And will has been a huge concept in One Piece. I mean, all the way back from Luffy wanting to fight and wanting to win and willing himself to victory back in Alabaster, to Zoro willing to cut things, to Luffy's will being expanded with Conquerors, his will against Kaido. Like, it has been a concrete facet of One Piece since the very beginning. So the fact that you could push your will into other people also makes a lot of sense, considering that Shanks can technically push his will and make other like stop observation from happening. Like put like with Rio, you can and Rio and Advanced Conquerors, like you can push your own will basically into people to attack them and harm them, right? Like Rio is basically just using your will and pushing it into other people. Why couldn't you do the same thing with Conquerors to that higher scale? I like that, man. That one's a good one.
Thank you.
Where's the theory video on this, guy?
Well, so it was like a 3-part thing that I did on TikTok. But it was like I was just kind of like spitballing it, and I was just like, I'm just coming up with these things, and I was just like, yeah, the command of all things. And I'm like, and that's I basically drew the exact line that you did. Why wouldn't the Gorosei or anyone ever step towards Imu in any sort of capacity to overthrow? Like, it doesn't make sense that someone would be able, like we have seen even in our own history, and Oda loves taking our actual history and using it in his story. So we've seen the rise and fall of many empires because of the way that the top can't keep control sometimes. But how are you going to tell me that a person has been in power for so many hundreds of years and they've never once lost control without being able to actually have legitimate will control over the people beneath them? It just, like, it doesn't make sense in any, like, and that could be, honestly, I at first I thought that this was why Dragon hasn't made a move on the world government, because he doesn't know a way around that. And that
would be really,
like, I was like, this guy has rallied forces. He's literally led revolutions. He's overturned, kingdoms in different countries, but he hasn't once stepped foot in Marie-Joie that we know. And and that's why I think it's really interesting. And this gets to a different point of why I think Eam has this power. I think that Eam used this power on 2 select individuals and made them kill a certain someone who was erased from history. I think that Eam used it on Garp and Roger to kill Rox.
Oh, that would be really interesting. Considering that Rox's goal was to become the king of the world, maybe he had the power to actually go against this. And kind of going on your point really fast, do you remember in Marineford when Mihawk said he has the ability to gather troops and have people together? Could that be a precursor to the command of all things?
That's
that
what
you
I'm
can
thinking.
You can rally people and bring them together, and it's like this is the precursor to the power. Just like how when Luffy showed his Conqueror's Haki, it was he started being able to use it on animals, scare animals. That was the precursor to that. When we see Luffy using Armament Haki, that was the precursor to Advanced Armament Haki with Ryo, Observation Haki with Future Sight. Like, there's always these little tidbits that Oda puts in. It's like, oh, well, Luffy's able to dodge this, and he's able to do this, and it's like, Luffy using Future Sight basically in Marineford with Mihawk, and it's like he used it there, but he couldn't actually bring it up, and it's like Mihawk making that statement because Mihawk probably has the breath of all things. He's able to basically slash anything he wants with like a single sword swing. He's able to basically deal massive amounts of damage. So it's like, does Mihawk understand this? Specifically because of his eyes, and as we see, people with those eyes, like those weird eye designs, always have some sort of hidden knowledge. Robin's eyes have like that same weird design. Mihawk's eyes and Eam's eyes, and specifically Gear 5 Luffy's eyes are also very interesting. So it's like, could these people have access to some sort of weird hidden knowledge or control over people? Which I think could be the case, especially because Mihawk made that statement in Marineford. He's able to bring people together, like past enemies, like Crocodile, saving Luffy's life, saving Ace for Luffy, not going against Whitebeard. It's adding up, man.
So I'll even take it a step further. So if you look at Zunisha's eyes when you finally do see them within like the dark pits, it has the same double ring effect. Which I'm wondering if that's because he has Eam's will inside of him that's pushing him to travel. So if you influence someone with your will, they have that same look in their eyes. Because if you literally like go back to the panel and stuff like that, the double ring eye is there. Like, you get to see it. And I was like, oh man, I'm like, if that's true and Eam used the command of all things on him and it like pushed that will into him and then he has it, it adds up a little bit too much for me. But on to what you were saying about the fact that Roger and Garp taking out Rox, I think, was Eam using that. If you look at basically what happened, Garp never wants credit for God Valley. And I think the reason is because he didn't want to do it. I don't think that he wanted to be there attacking Rox. I think it was 100% against his will. And I think that's why Roger probably never talked about it. He didn't want that out there in the world because he wasn't able to do it. And there was even a part of me that was thinking about like Mother Nature and being able to control people without devil fruits as well. Because we don't know if Rox had or had not had a devil fruit. But if Mother Nature is against devil fruits in that way and using the command of all things, what if you can only use it on certain people when the criteria fits? And if that's true, then maybe you can't use them on certain devil fruit users, because otherwise, then why couldn't Eam use it on the rest of Rox's crew to have his own crew turn against him? Which it would make sense because
they're all devil fruit users.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. And kind of going to your point, I think it kind of also fits into my theory that like there were multiple D-Clan members. D-Clan members being able to have this power, as we see with Luffy, we see with Dragon, and we also see even with Roger, just being able to bring people together and have that. That might be a specific trait of the D-Clan, which is why they're persecuted so much by Eam, because if other people can have this trait and have this command of all things, that would directly go against them, as we also know with rocks. Now, it could be that if your haki is strong enough that you can actually go against them, or it could be the devil fruit theory. A really interesting thing is that all devil fruits have a will. So it could be that it's way harder to go in to put your will into somebody when they already have multiple wills in their body, which could be why maybe Eam had to be closer and couldn't do it from farther away, because we don't actually know if Eam actually like leaves the dungeon underneath Marie Joie. So it could be if you have a devil fruit, you have this extra layer of protection against Eam's control, which is why instead Rox and Garp, or Roger and Garp, two people who don't have a devil fruit, they're easier to get into and control and to influence. It also could be that Rox had this power as well, an ambition to be the king of the world and to go against people. Like, that's an insane ambition. Like, how would you actually be able to do this? The command of all things. Eam not wanting this to happen not only got the two strongest people in the world at that time to go against him, but then erased him from history, therefore erasing the Rox line. Getting rid of one of the D-Clan lines, meaning that there are only 11 D-Clans technically left, which could be really interesting. And I think that D-Clan members, and if that's the case, that means that a D-Clan member can also be, or two D-Clan members were actually also possessed by this. So it doesn't matter that you're a D-Clan, you can still get possessed by this command of all things. It's just that you need to have that power as well, which we kind of see, like, as your power gets stronger and as you evolve, as we saw with Luffy versus Kaido, like, you're able to resist more things. Like Law in his Blackbeard fight, like Law was able to resist Dakyu's Devil Fruit with his haki. So it's like you have to have this insane level of haki. And as we see with Luffy, like his haki has been growing at an exponential rate. Like he might actually be one of the people who awaken this power and become the next Rox. And I also think it's interesting because you're right. Like Rox was kind of erased from history, and everything we know about him is like, oh, his crew was horrible. It was awful. It sucked. But it's like, is that true? Is it true?
That's exactly where I was going with this, because if you look at the makeup of Rox's crew, it stands to reason to me that the makeup of Rox's crew is going to be the same makeup of Luffy's crew by the end of series. Mm-hmm. And now, this is where I fall into the One Piece madness. But I actually think that Rox didn't want to be king of the world. I think that he had a dream. And I actually, now this is kind of taking a little bit of inspiration from, I think it was Volume 1 podcast, where they talked about how Luffy's second dream is for everyone to be pirates because then everyone is free. And what would that do? It would go against Mother Nature. It would go against the order of things. It would go against everything that Eam has fought for so long to maintain. And if the command of all things didn't work on Rox, even worse. So you're telling me that if that's Rox's true dream, that makes him immediately enemy number one. And what would he immediately do once the realization came about that there was someone on top of the throne above the world government that is literally trying to control everything beneath it, and he wants everyone to be free? He's going straight for him. That's a total Luffy move, because he's going to dismantle that from the top down so that everyone can be free. And this is where I think it gets interesting. If Roger is Luffy's first dream, right, to be king of the pirates, Rox's dream is his second dream. So therefore, he's inheriting both of their wills, not just Roger's.
So to counter that very slightly, Yamato did state that Luffy's dream is the exact same as that Luffy and Roger's dream were the same, and they kind of showed that in episode 10-15, especially when Ace told Yamato, like, that's my brother's dream, and it's like, oh, that's the same dream that Odin heard Roger say, and there's been this parallel to that. Do you think that Roger and Rox could have had the same dream then?
So that's where I think it's interesting, because this is again, I'm teetering on the madness, but I think that Garp, Rox, and Roger were Ace, Luffy, and Sabo close. And I think that what happened was because Roger went on to meet Odin and then become King of the Pirates after God Valley. So when Rox died, Roger tried to take up the mantle that
Took
he
out his
left.
dream.
Exactly. So he took on his dream and he said, I want to do this thing to Odin and Whitebeard. And I think that's why Whitebeard approved so much of Odin going with him, because he knew it was his old captain's dream.
That's very interesting. That could make, especially if Roger didn't want to take down Rox, it would make sense, because all the way back in Drum Island, when does a man die? The Dr. Hero speech, like when people forget about him, like and it's like, if you don't forget about him, if you keep their dream going, people never die. Going back to the Blackbeard speech on Jaya, a man's dream will never end because people will consistently bring that back up. I like that. I think it could definitely work out. Another very interesting thing, kind of going at the devil fruits, like if you have a devil fruit, you won't be very easily influenced by Eames' will. Could it be why Blackbeard is so focused on having devil fruits on his crew? Because he knows that if he does, like he can go up against the world government and not have to worry as much for his crew actually betraying him.
I think that also plays into that as well. I think you're right. And I also think that's why he would be the exact, like him and Luffy are probably the two worst people to face off against Eam. Because if you subscribe to the theory that there is 3 people inside of Blackbeard, that's 3 wills and 2 devil fruits. Possibly 3. So that would be basically 6 wills combined into one person. That would be next to impossible. Even if you didn't have the ability to resist, having all those wills would just make everything so convoluted in a way that you might not be able to force your will into someone. So that's why I think it's very interesting that Blackbeard is so devil fruit reliant, and he wants everyone in his crew. And he even says it against Law. He said the sacrifice is more than worth it. And I'm like, it makes sense.
Why would you put your crew at a disadvantage in the water when you're a pirate to not even have a single person if you weren't going after something that required devil fruits? And it's like, even Law says it, like in that panel, he's like, why are you doing this? And it's like, I think that Blackbeard has some sort of insane knowledge. I'm one of those people who think that Blackbeard is playing 4D chess. He is an archaeologist first and foremost. He has this knowledge. Like, he knew all of the people on level 6, right, of Impelled Down. Like, he specifically went after them. What is his end goal? And it's like, we always see the parallel between Luffy and Blackbeard. And I've talked about this before, how they basically are the exact same people, but with different goals. It's like, what is Blackbeard actually going after? Does Blackbeard know about the treasure under Marie Joie? Is Blackbeard having people go, like why give Shiryu the clear fruit unless he's going to like be actively searching for information? Like, he went down to Impel Down to grab people who probably know too much, you know what I mean? Like, they probably know more than they're letting on. Why go after those people? Why give them devil fruits? Why only have devil fruits if your end goal wasn't to try to overthrow a person like that? And it's like thinking about it and going through it, it's just making way too much sense.
Yeah, and I think that there's something very special about Blackbeard. And I don't know what it is yet. I really can't put my finger on it because I've thought about a million different things. But something that I really wanted to bring up is when Vegapunk dropped this theory where he's like dreams and desires, I was thinking in my head, is there a possibility that a fruit was ever split up? Like, you took the properties of a fruit and basically put it into 2. And the reason I say that is because when you look at the panel, it's from Fishman Island, and they go, it's like the quintuplets or whatever, of the mermaid kids. They give us all the names of all of the god fruits, basically.
Yeah.
And the last one is Yonka 1 and Yonka 2, instead of being like Goka or whatever. So does that mean at one point that the Yami Yami and the Quake Quake fruit were one whole fruit that actually was a god fruit, and that is the sole purpose that Blackbeard went onto Whitebeard's crew from the jump, because he knew that was part of it. Then he killed Thatch when he saw the other part of it and brought them both together.
That's interesting. And the thing is that there are a lot of theories on why Blackbeard can't eat devil fruits. One of my favorite that I've kind of seen floating around is that if you eat somebody's heart, you can have multiple devil fruits. But even if that's the case, we know that if you eat two distinct devil fruits, two different devil fruits, you explode from the inside, you combust. At least that's what we've been told. Is that true? I'm not sure. But if the two fruits were the same, were at one point the same, you technically wouldn't be eating two separate devil fruits.
Exactly. It would be one that just got split. And
so the same effect wouldn't hold as eating two distinct devil fruits.
Exactly.
Interesting.
And I always thought it was weird that they did that, because obviously all of the gods are based off of like the accounting scheme. You've got Ichika, you've got Nika, you've got Senka, and then you got Yonka. So it should be 1, 2, 3, 4, and then there were 5 of those kids. But instead of them being what would naturally be Goka, they named them Yonka 2. So it was like, it's foreshadowing the fact that these are the 4 gods that were talked about in Skypiea. The rain god, the forest god, the earth god, and everything. But the earth god was labeled twice, only as 1 and 2. So what if that was just one fruit that just got separated over time that needs to be brought back together, and Blackbeard knew that and did it? Like, that could be very interesting. And what I also thought was interesting was it's the shadow and the earth, basically, which to me sounds similar to Hades, because Hades was under the earth and had darkness. Like, that was the whole thing. So I was like, if they're two sides of the same coin, it would make sense that they were part 1 and part 2 of just the same fruit.
And it would kind of also make sense, considering that Pluton, the ancient weapon, carries the name of Hades. Could it be that that was created specifically with, the user who had these two fruits, literally on a ship named after himself, the god of the underworld, and because it was so powerful, and he was so powerful, the ship was sealed away and his devil fruit was split in two, so that nobody could ever have that power. And nobody would ever eat 2 devil fruits, because at that point, like, you're just going to have the same issues, unless they were once one devil fruit. That one is a really interesting one, man.
Yeah.
That, that one's pretty good.
I actually also think that Blackbeard is going to go to Wano and take Pluton, actually, because he's the only one who could open the borders the way with the Gura Gura. Because it would honestly make sense that if Caribou is working for him, if Caribou lets him know that's where it is, he could just easily waltz up there, smash the walls down, and take Pluton for himself.
See, I always had a theory that after Wano ended, the lurking legend was actually going to be Blackbeard, because Blackbeard would want to go, because I had a theory, if he didn't have a Zoan already, that would be the last fruit that he needs. He would need a Zoan. And what better Zoan than Kaido's devil fruit? He's also been seen very close to Wano, because he was able to get Law as Law went on the different island, and he was like, I was waiting for you. Could it be that he's maybe waiting for other information? Caribou is very interesting because he has all of this knowledge. But there is one other person who knows that Pluton is on Wano. And that's the person he's fighting right now.
Yeah.
It's Law. So technically, if Law had to save his crew by telling him some sort of information, why not tell him that? And then Blackbeard makes his way to Wano and could hit that ship. I don't think Blackbeard has, like, his ship is, like, okay. Is his ship even named?
It's the Saber of Zebek, which is
Yeah,
very interesting because of what we know about Rox.
about Roxy Sebek. But that's not, see, it's interesting because is that his own ship's name, or is he waiting to name his own ship? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, is that just a placeholder that right now he's trying to create Rox's crew, which we were talking about earlier with all the devil fruits? Could it be that he was waiting specifically for Pluton so that he could take that as his main ship?
I mean, it would make sense because honestly, all his other ships look like complete shit in my opinion. They just look like like an upgraded raft that he had from Jaya, and I'm like, these ships designs kind of blow. Like I look at like ships like the Sunny and like even the Mary, and then you look at like the Oro Jackson and like the Moby Dick, and you're like, these are cool ships, and then you see his and you're like, dude, it's a raft with like a little bit of like a tiny
Yeah,
thing
right.
on it.
Like he's an emperor. Where is his ship? Unless he's waiting specifically for a ship, which could be Pluton, which would make sense then. He's Blackbeard. He has the darkness fruit, something that he's already said can swallow the sun. Back during, of course, again, like Jai Skypea during the Ace fight, like, was that foreshadowing that he is technically the king of the underworld? He is Hades, the god of the underworld, I should say, and that he's going to take that ship. I think it's interesting. I think that there's a lot of narrative evidence to point to that. Also, specifically because it seems like Blackbeard's path is always to cause like the most trouble possible. Like he's always trying to have as many casualties, do as much damage. The perfect ship for him is Pluton.
Yeah, it really is. Like, and that's why I think it would be very interesting if like. I almost think that there's gonna come a time. I don't know if it's gonna be after Egghead or if there's gonna be, because I've seen people talking about how, well, Kuma's coming to Egghead, and so's Kizaru, and like it's just gonna be this really overwhelming force, and Kuma's gonna send the Straw Hats away again, and they're gonna go in different directions, or they're gonna be sent in small groups, and I was like. Honestly, after learning what they could from Dr. Vegapunk, I would love to see at least Chopper and Zoro go back to Wano and wrap things up the way they should. Like, visiting Ryuma's grave. And I think that there has to be some form of Zoro figuring out how to blacken his blade. And I was like, and then, he could take that knowledge. Because, I mean, Vegapunk's Vegapunk. And I think that Chopper, to be honest, I think he's got a lot more under his belt than he knows that he has currently. But I think that what's very interesting is if Smile Fruits aren't, like, they're not suffering from a disease per se. They're suffering from having a devil fruit, basically, but with zero of the benefits. They literally have all the side effects, none of the benefits. So I'm like, that's not really a disease that is curable by Chopper, I feel like. Because Chopper said he wants to cure all diseases. So it would make sense that with the knowledge that Vegapunk has about extracting lineage factors and being able to take that out of someone, that could be Chopper's way of learning how to take the side effects of the Smile Fruits out of the people. Like, a lot of people give Chopper a lot of shit for what happened at the end of Wano. Like, a lot. And I like Chopper a lot. And I think that there's no way that he would have left those people suffer that way if he knew about it and was able to cure it.
He can't do anything. Yeah, like he can't do anything because it's not a disease. It's more science. But you're right. Vegapunk has this knowledge, can create perfect devil fruits. Couldn't he just find a way to, even if he can't take out the Smile Fruit, fix them basically, and improve the devil fruits to basically fix the smile fruits and turn them into actual devil fruits.
Yeah.
That could also be something that could happen.
Yeah, like maybe there's something similar to the way that seraphims have that like liquid on them that might be like the sad liquid, and have that and inject that into the person to make up the difference for where the smile fruit went off and where the actual power needs to be. And then that would make a lot of sense, to be honest, because then all of a sudden end of series war seems a little bit more crazy with a bunch of samurai from Wano that have a lot of power.
Yeah, I agree 100%. It's super interesting because there's a lot with Wano that I think people are specifically mad about Ryuma, but my theory, my hot take is the reason that Zoro already visited Ryuma's grave. The reason we can't know about it is because what he learned directly is like direct information about willpower. And that's something that we have to wait. And that's why in the beginning, he's like, Vegapunk, I need to talk to you about something. Because he was able to maybe even talk to the will of Ryuma's sword when he returned it to that grave and wants to ask something like, hey, like I was told this, what is willpower and what is this actual thing? Like why does my sword have a will of its own? Like you can create artificial devil fruits. You've created things with artificial will. Like what on earth is this? And that's what I think we're going to get. We're going to get a nice little flashback of Zoro, something maybe even specifically with his Grim Reaper from Enma, because I believe that was the will of Enma. And he was like, yo, like, Vegapunk, you're the main expert on this. Tell me what's going on. Because Vegapunk is already for just every single chapter spitting information out about willpower, the Void Century. Wouldn't it make sense for him to give us even more information? Because now we know that even objects can have wills. So it's like, how far can this actually go? Like what can willpower do? And I think that we're going to see a lot more with Haki. We've been seeing a lot with devil fruits recently. A lot more with Haki is going to start coming out because that's just basically willpower incarnate.
Yeah, I agree with that wholeheartedly. And I think that originally Zoro was going, and maybe he does want to talk about the Grim Reaper, but I was almost subscribed to the fact that Zoro firsthand witnessed the terrible things that happened to the people who ate smile fruits. And I think that's probably that was what I thought that he would ask about, because he was there when, Yasui died, and he was wondering why everyone was laughing, and it was something that hit him specifically more than I think everybody else. So I think that's where he would be like, hey, one of your cronies, Caesar, made these terrible fruits. What can you do about it to make it right? Because, this technically happened under your watch almost. Like, you should have known about this, and what can you do to prevent it? Because, as we see, he's got crazy theories about devil fruits. He knows exactly what he needs to do, to the point where the only time he considered Momo's fruit a failure was just the color. Like, he's a perfectionist in that way. And I actually did think that there was going to be something really stupid like that, and that's why Momo's fruit was like that. But there was something that I thought was interesting about it, was the fact that he said that it was just the color, and it wasn't the fact that the devil fruit did not have any swirls. I thought that would have been exactly what he thought was the real problem. It's a perfect copy up until the point where the swirls weren't there. And I thought that was going to be what he said. But the color thing is very much an Oda just trying to be funny.
Yeah, just totally messing with us. It is interesting that his devil fruit don't have swirls, but I'm wondering if that's just a byproduct of it being artificial that you can't control. Like that's how you can distinguish like a real devil fruit, because it's called the Fibonacci spiral, isn't it? Everything natural has that sort of spiral, which is why I personally think that devil fruits have that spiral, because even though they're seen as unnatural, right, throughout the world, like it's very clearly natural because they have this spiral of nature on them. Whereas something like Vegapunk's devil fruit could never have that because it's made in a lab. It's artificial. Which kind of also leads me into my theory that devil fruits are actually the way that humans were supposed to evolve, and that this is the most natural thing, but somebody wanted to stop that evolution, that being Emu, Mother Nature, God, and that's the reason why you basically are punished. And if you're right that like Emu is Mother Nature incarnate and it has control, like like everything in nature rejects devil fruits because it is the right path of history. There's also this really cool thing that I was sent from my friend Ragnar, who is very cool, but he sent me this paragraph written by Immanuel Kant, who was a philosopher and created the philosophy of Kantism, which is basically like the most strict philosophy that you could ever think of. And when you're reading this, and I'm going to send it to you after this, it's basically the story of One Piece, in which you cannot have freedom and also obey. It's either one or the other. It's either you have freedom and you are able to do what you want with your life, or you obey the rules set for you by God. And as you're reading this excerpt and stuff, you're like, oh my gosh, this is what One Piece is. It's basically it juxtaposes two ideas. One being freedom and being able to do what you want, to freely evolve, to freely live your life. And one of them is the steadfast rules set by somebody who's your creator, in which you cannot break because that would be going against the higher power. Really interesting stuff. I mean, I'm definitely going to send it to you afterwards, but that I think is the basis. And I also think that it helps your theory a lot with Emu, because if Emu is Mother Nature and the one who's rejecting devil fruits, and this is a Garden of Eden type thing, it would make sense that there can't be any freedom, because because with freedom you cannot obey, which I think is cool.
Yeah, and I really think that the more we talk about it, the more it just makes sense that Eam is Mother Nature in that way, because like we talk about end of series, you know, we wonder who's going to be it, right? A lot of people say Blackbeard, a lot of people say Eam, some people who I think are deluded say Akainu, but it's just like I think it's Eam. I think Eam is the final boss. You know, it's the one person that sits upon the throne above all others, and that to me is Endgame. And whether or not Blackbeard maybe throws a wrench in the works by taking that spot before the end of series, and then he's the last boss, I think it's whoever is on top of that throne, whether it be Eam or Blackbeard. And I have a love-hate relationship with Blackbeard. I like his character, but I also do suffer from what I like to call Larryitis, where I just don't see enough on panel and like what he's done to give him as much credit. But like from what we've seen, he has done good stuff. Like he's done a lot of, you know, just the fact that he's going toe to toe with Law when Law has like the most busted devil fruit, like
Yeah.
It shows that he has a lot in his bag that he's just not willing to show. But
So I have a question for you, right? So there's always the argument who's going to be endgame villain, Eam or Blackbeard, because we know there's so many parallels to Rox and Roger and the old Century. Do you think it's possible that because Eam is so strong and there's so much kind of riding on defeating Eam, that Blackbeard and Luffy could technically team up at the end, and then Blackbeard just betrays Luffy, and then we get that fight? Do you think that there's any possibility of that?
I think that's a very high possibility, to be honest. That's kind of how I saw things, because in my mind, if Eam does have that strength that I think he or she does, I mainly lead towards a woman, but if she has that strength, then there's a possibility that even their crews might turn against them in a way that would cause Luffy and Blackbeard to have to really step up their game, because they're growing with their crews and they have these, you know, these powers and stuff like that. But as we said, like Luffy has this innate ability to have people follow him in a way that's almost reminiscent of like basically anybody who's in power that's able to rally in a way. You know, if you get enough people behind you and they start like it, people love to join in on something like that. And it's just like even Mihawk and all these other characters, Crocodile, like all these characters want to be a part of it, so much so that in Dressrosa it was a battle royale for the Maramara, but all of a sudden, you know, Usopp saves everybody and everybody rallies under Luffy. He all of a sudden has this grand fleet that he doesn't even want. Like he doesn't even want these people, but they want to be underneath him and push him towards his goal. And so if he has that power, coupled with what we talked about with Blackbeard having multiple wills, multiple devil fruits, and be able to combat that in that way, then maybe the rest of their crew won't be able to do it. And then it's like Blackbeard's strong crew, Luffy's strong crew, and Eam versus them two. And I would love to see it, to be honest. That would be
cool.
insane. Like, and
cool.
especially because, I mean, Blackbeard's slightly ruthless, so I think that he wouldn't flinch at the fact that he would need to maybe kill some of his crew. But I don't know if he would want to do that. But Luffy wouldn't want to do that. So he's going to have to figure out how to basically manhandle his whole crew by himself in a way that he doesn't hurt them. So that would just be very interesting to me.
I agree. It just brings up a lot of possibilities. I love the theory. I think it has a real chance of being the exact direction that Oda's going into. But yeah, awesome stuff, dude.
Yeah, and like
Crazy.
one thing that's really crazy to me is, so when Sengoku is talking about the God Valley incident, he never once, and I mean never, says that he was there. He never once says that Roger's crew was there. He solely is talking about Garp and Roger being there. There's no talk of Marines. It's just them, basically. And so what made, like, it would be insane, right, to think that Roger and Garp alone could take on Rocks, knowing how strong he's supposed to be.
Yeah.
Big Mom, Kaido, and Whitebeard. Like,
Yeah.
to have all those powerhouses, not to mention everybody else that was on Shiki.
I mean,
Like, you're telling me that all those people were taken over by two people and they came out on top. Eam had to be there in my mind to have that, like, to tip the scales. Like, and that's why, to me, it makes more sense that Roger, Garp, and Rocks were like this, just like Luffy, Ace, and Sabo. They probably tried to stop Rocks in a way that was very genuine, because they knew that he was going to be going up against something maybe he couldn't handle, but he still went headfirst into it, just like Luffy. But then on top of that, you have to think, like, okay, so all these people are rallying behind Rocks to do this. And what happens? They get beat. They get beat bad. And, like, to the point where God Valley and the whole incident is basically erased from history. And the people who lived to tell about it didn't tell anyone about it. Like,
yeah, which is interesting. Like, nobody said anything about it. Like, nobody even brings it up. Like, like you would think that if if you were Shiki or somebody, you would want to be saying that stuff like all the time. Like,
even Roger, who literally went and tried to find out the whole Void Century, never brings it up. Even Rayleigh doesn't bring it up, because maybe he didn't even know about it because Roger didn't want to talk about it. Like, there's so many people that could have said something, but they didn't. And, like, Garp is renowned for being this hero, but, like, no one ever really talks about the actual thing that made him that hero. And then all of a sudden we get this, lore drop of, like, oh, this is what happened at God Valley. And it's like no one in the room even questioned, like, the king of the pirates and one of the strongest Marines versus a crew of monsters. And they won? Like, that's crazy. Like,
Yeah, there's a lot missing from God Valley, and it's definitely something that needs to be expanded upon very soon. I mean, we're end game One Piece right now, so I think that like as we keep going, we need to be getting more information about God Valley, like for sure.
yeah, and like the thing that's really crazy, and the thing that leads me to believe that Rox, Roger, and Garp were cool is there's just something about the fact that Dragon looks exactly like Rox. It's a little too close for me. And what would make the most sense to me is Garp, Rox, and Roger are very close. So Rox actually, his real son is Dragon, but he took the monkey name under Garp because his name was erased from history. He couldn't use it anymore. And, you know, it would almost stand to reason that that's what happened. And I mean, you could also think that maybe, because I mean, when Garp talks about Dragon being his son, he doesn't ever really say that he's his son. He always says that he's just Luffy's father. He doesn't ever say my son. So it could be his son-in-law, you know, and then his mother could actually have been Garp's daughter. So like there's a lot of people that think that, and I think that it holds some weight, especially knowing exactly what happened between Roger and Garp when he was dying. He's like, hey, this is my son.
Yeah.
Now,
I agree.
Ace rebelled because he didn't want to use Roger's name, and so he took his mother's name. But in that way, it almost kind of lands to the credence of like he went with his wife's name instead.
I think it's possible, especially because there's precedent in One Piece, and Oda likes to use, he likes to parallel a lot in a story, and we see this with pre-time skip, with post-time skip arcs. Different characters parallel each other. It's probably his favorite literary element to use. So the fact that we got this pre-time skip where we had the Ace situation, and we got that pre-time skip like very close to the end of pre-time skip with Marineford, it would make sense that something similar could happen post-time skip, considering that we're at the final saga. So I think that Oda's writing style leads to that being true.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think that's one of the reasons that Dragon is very much against the world government. Because he knows what happened to his father. He knows exactly what that history was literally just completely done away with just to keep from his father being known. You know, and I think that it makes the most sense that that happened. You know, and like who better to lead a revolution than someone who has seen the tyranny of the world government firsthand, you know, and especially if his father truly did want everyone to be free, and that's the punishment that he got for it.
I agree. It does. It's like there's so many things that lead to that in One Piece, but I do think that the fact that you see the symbolism of revolutionary with Dragon, especially in the Vegapunk flashback. The want to have information from the Void Century, the want to fight back against the world government, and like specifically fighting back against the world government. If he was Garp's son, would he create the revolution, or would he actually go through like the ranks? Like it's very similar to Kobe, where it's like Sword is kind of the revolutionary front where they're trying to do good things. They're trying to basically bring it to light. Like Dragon went the complete opposite direction. Yes, the same thing did happen with Luffy, where Garp tried to make him a Marine and it didn't work out. But that's because there was another pirate influence in his life. Could the same thing be for Dragon? But that was his father, Rox, and that he married into the Monkey D family with Luffy's mom, who we don't know anything about. We haven't seen anything, but you're right. Garp doesn't say, "Oh, Dragon, my son." He says, "Luffy, my grandson." So it's interesting. there's a lot of interesting stuff that happens.
It's just a lot to unpack because there's just like these little tiny minute details that can lead to down these rabbit holes basically. And like even something simple like what if originally Dragon only knew what the world told him as well about his father, and maybe him being attached to the Marines in a time where he was going through the ranks as a Marine, and then he truly got to see what the world government did. And what if he became privy to that information and then he left? A lot of people think that he might have made it to admiral status, and that's why he might have a wind logia or something like that, and then realized what happened. Because I don't know if you've ever heard like the story of like I think it was like the monkey, the dog, and
Chinese mythology, right?
yeah, so then there's like four of them, but one of them leaves, and that would have been Dragon that left because there's a dragon that leaves the like serving the god. And so it almost stands to reason that he may have been a Marine, and that could have been why he was taken in by Garp, who's a Marine. And then he turns around and is like, okay, well, this is all I've ever known. And I just know that my father wasn't a good person. So I'm going to join the Marines just like, the person that took me in and pay them back for what they've done for me. But then once he got there, he realized that he couldn't put the fire out while he's in the house, And so he was like, I need to leave because I found out the truth. And it could be something as simple as, look who he was part of. He knew Professor Clover. Professor Clover knew the Void Century. He could have talked to him about the Void Century, and they could have even figured out what happened to Rox and been like, hey man, I have to tell you the truth of what really happened in the Void Century and this time. And that could have been the pushing point of him being like, I need to leave the Marines because I thought I could affect change from within because there's corruption, but I didn't realize that it starts all the way at the top and comes completely down from there.
Which could be, especially because now with Sabo and the destruction of Luisa, we're seeing that any semblance of information getting out about the Empty Throne and stuff, like, immediately destroyed. Like, what happened when they started creeping more into the Void Century and O'Hara? Buster called the entire area. Nobody gets this information. Like, people who have it or who can even remotely try to find it, like Annie's lobby. Like, Robin was going to be taken away and basically killed so that they could seal this information off. Like that, if people knew what was going on and this information got out, it would be basically mayhem. Like, and that's why the Void Century was wiped from existence, because once people understand that there is no freedom, the only thing that they can do is want freedom. And as we know, what powers devil fruits? Like, what is the source of power in the One Piece world? Dreams, will, wanting. And it's like, that's why it's like you have to suppress that. There's something very interesting that I noticed, and that most of the world's government-controlled places don't actually have, like, holidays. Like, there's not really a lot of celebrations. Like, the only time you really see a celebration is when Luffy and his crew go in, and they have the celebration after the arc. And I thought it was really interesting because Wano, which isn't controlled by the world government, has a celebration. They have a festival. Also, I've heard that Elbaf has a festival, but I don't know too much about that, and I also don't know how much the world government has any control in Elbaf. But I just thought it was interesting because it could be a way to suppress people and to keep them from dreaming. Because when you're partying and you're having a good time, you're more likely to give out your wants and needs, rather when you're depressed and you're just kind of within the actual system, which is something I found really interesting.
Yeah, and I actually saw your TikTok on that, and I was like, that is a very good point, because even when we were, and now granted it wasn't like under great terms or anything, Alabasta had no celebrations up until the point where Luffy, had a banquet after they kicked Crocodile's ass. And then even in like Dressrosa and stuff like that, they didn't have any really celebrations except for like, oh, we have a coliseum where people fight to the death and shit. So it's like, we haven't seen any of that. But I think that the world government has almost no hands in Elbaf, because I think they're just like a sovereign nation that takes care of themselves. Like, I don't think that, because they're ruled by King Loki, and I think that he is the governing king, and I don't, like, we saw no giants at the Reverie, so I don't think that they have any hands in Elbaf. So it would make sense that, especially being modeled after Vikings, they would have Viking celebrations and stuff like that.
And that they actually have celebrations, because if the world
Exactly.
government isn't involved, they're not going to be able to stop any of it.
It even is a very interesting that you bring up the Fire Festival in Wano too, because what did they do when they were in Wano? They all wrote their dreams on the things and put them into the air.
And then put them up in the air, yeah.
Exactly. And the world government would be like, nah, not that. So, yeah, I think...
the people.
Yeah. And, you know, it brings up so much, like, thoughts, and I'm like, if Luffy is the power of imagination, and if he just imagines that he can do something, he can do it, which is an incredible power in itself. But that's like how his power has worked from the beginning, you know? And it's almost as if, like, you know, he sees something and he just like, he's like, I can do that, and then just does it. Like, and I'm like, it's almost like his power is also the power of dreams. He dreams that he can do something. He has the desire to do something. He does it. Which makes me also think that Joy Boy is probably the original creator of Devil Fruits. He's the one who brought dreams to people and desires and helped them manifest them in a way. Because his power of imagination, I wonder if his awakening in that way can make people also do the same thing. So, like, something as simple as, like, he grabs the ground, he turns it to rubber. Mm-hmm. If he's touching or is using his awakening on someone and they imagine they can do something, I wonder if they can do that too.
That would be interesting. If he can actually, because we know that he can turn people into rubber. Could he actually transfer his power into people? Maybe in the next couple of chapters, because he's using Gear 5 right now, he could. What's very interesting about Luffy's Devil Fruit, and the reason that I kind of like the idea that celebration stifle stuff, is because during the Fire Festival, right before Luffy's awakening, they're throwing all of their dreams up. And basically, a lot of their dreams is to just have Kaido defeated and to be free. And, like, that's the main theme of their dreams, is freedom. Which is why I think that with Luffy awakening during the Kaido fight, it was because people were hoping for freedom. And it's like, if you wish for freedom, who's going to answer it? Joy Boy. And that's how Joy Boy was, like, actually did it. And something that actually supports that point is the Fishman Revolution. I think it was 400 or 200 years ago. People keep correcting me on it. But the Fishman Revolution, which awakened the ancient robot, which then attacked Marie Joie, right? Really interesting, because what is a revolution but people wanting freedom? And all of a sudden, something from the Void Century ends up perking up and moving. Could that have been like the fire revolution? We see Luffy is able to create fire. Like, how is he able to really do that? At first, we thought it was friction. Now we know it's this imagination power. We also had mentions of an eternal flame, like an eternal flame fire source on Egghead. So it's like, How many times did Joy Boy almost awaken from wanting freedom and people's dreams of freedom? And it's like, that's why they stifled celebration. That's why they stifle everything. The world government has a big control. They want to obey, keep order. And it's like, as soon as you start wishing for freedom, which is what the people of Wano did, all of a sudden Joy Boy awakens. And it's like, now it's stuck, because now we have an awakened Joy Boy, which can then probably one of the worst things for Eam at the moment.
That's very interesting. So does that mean that you think that the eternal power source is dreams?
Yeah, so I think that so it's very interesting, because like I said, there's actually really no electricity used in One Piece outside of, like, Vegapunk and, like, scientist laboratories. Like, if you're actually looking at it, most of it is candlelight, or weird artificial like other light sources. But it's interesting that like Vegapunk specifically is like electricity, even though he has it, isn't cutting it, like it isn't working. So what else could power this robot? And it's like I said, like all of a sudden this robot awakens during when people are wanting freedom. We get a lot of people who like the freest people in the world are able to use fire and lightning. Like Kaido was a pretty free person, I think, and he had control over lightning, which I think is pretty interesting considering that Enel also uses lightning, and he's the god of lightning, which is it kind of goes into it like what was this actual power source? At the end of Wano with Shanks, we see that you were able to take your Conqueror's Haki, your willpower, and push it incredibly far. What if the ancient kingdom was powered because Joy Boy's Haki spanned over the entire kingdom and created an eternal flame of source and powered everything? Like his dreams were so massive that he was the power.
That would be wild. That's actually really interesting though, because if Joy Boy had such incredible dreams to do something, you know, and basically give freedom to everyone, that dream is so big, you would almost think that it would have the ability to power things. Like it's very much. I think that you might be onto something with that.
I think
it would honestly make sense if, like, so the Enel cover story, going back to that, we see Enel go to the moon and it's run out of power for the automatas. So then he just charges it with his electricity and things start going.
Yeah.
But what's really interesting is if that was originally part of the Ancient Kingdom or a subsect of the Ancient Kingdom on the moon, which we saw with like the Skypeans and the with the hieroglyphs, it would make sense almost that they. Oh, you know what? Actually, it's even more interesting because the hieroglyphs show the three people who are holding balloons. It looks like, but what if those were just like ways to contain the power source of dreams? And that's what they were using to power things. Because, and it would make sense that the moon ran out of power at one point. Because if the moon ran out of power, it was because Eam has literally crushed the dreams of everyone on Earth to the point where there isn't enough power to make it to the moon. So
I agree.
That's why it ran out of power and it now had to power it again. Like, it's just so interesting that that's what would have happened. And it stands to reason that you're probably right, because if the Fishman Revolution was going on and that original suit of armor, you know, that big bulky machine was powered by dreams, at that very moment when the revolution happened, everyone in Fishman Island had the same dream, united under one cause of freedom, that it would give life to it. But then, once it got all the way up to Marie Joie, what happened? It ran out of power because no one up there is dreaming because they already are living the best life that they have. They have no need to dream further. They're gods. So the power might not have been able to make it from where Fishman Island was and that revolution was happening up to that suit of armor, and that's why it stopped.
So what I actually think is that there was a Joy Boy candidate in that like the leader of that revolution was actually a Joy Boy candidate who never awakened because he was killed. And I think that could be it. Because like if you're thinking about like Shanks, right, and how he can push it out, technically if Joy Boy was still alive, it could have like moved and pushed forward, and maybe there was even a spark left inside of it, which could have been like as soon as it got to there, like it lost the last spark of Joy Boy. And it's like now because the Joy Boy candidate is dead, it completely stopped and then had to move forward. But you're right. If there weren't any people dreaming, like it could be that it was like solely based on dreams, and that now there's like because there's no dreams in Marie Joie, like or that they stifled it so much that it's like now people can't even dream of freedom and stuff. And we kind of see that with Koala, because Koala had like nothing, no personality, only did ordered, and it could be like as soon as it reached that moment, even the slaves in Marichwa don't have dreams, and therefore it couldn't be powered. So it could kind of go both ways at the moment. Really interesting stuff.
Yeah, I mean, like, honestly, it's so crazy because dreams is such a way to make it all kind of make sense. And I think that it is interesting to think that there was probably a Joy Boy candidate that gave it spark. It would be interesting to find out because we know that there was a poneglyph down in Fishman Island. It would be interesting to see if there was maybe even something else that was down there. What I think is crazy is basically Robin has read so many of these poneglyphs but has barely given us any information off of them.
Listen, bro, I had a theory. I don't know if you saw it, but I think that Robin is holding on to more information and isn't telling the Straw Hats because she knows that there might be a bad outcome and she doesn't want to tell any of them.
Yeah, and I agree with that because it would be like because she may see the writing on the walls and be like, if I try to interject and say this, it could change the trajectory of history just enough that it could end in disaster. Because what if, like, and this circles back to my rocks being exactly like Luffy, if he was also a Joy Boy candidate, that could be the worst outcome.
Yeah.
Like, again, a Joy Boy candidate gets killed, erased from history, and the cycle repeats itself over again to waiting for the next one to come along.
Now Robin is scared that Luffy is going to fall into this exact same trap. Because how many Joy Boy candidates has there actually been? I like the theory that there can be multiple people who can become Joy Boy. In fact, I actually think that there are way more God fruits. Specifically, that a Nell's fruit is also a God fruit, and that all of the God fruits are based off of the planets. As we know, there's the Earth God that would probably be Pluton. Lightning God would be based on one of the other planets. I mean, Earth God could also be Earth, but it's like there could be a specific devil fruit correlating to every single planet. And those are the gods because all of our planets are basically named after gods. And it's like, could it be that people who have these devil fruits, who became these people, like these were Joy Boy candidates, and just some of them were not just lost to history, but were erased from history by Emu because they almost became Joy Boy candidates.
I agree. And I even thought about just like the fact that, so when we talked about the Gura Gura and the darkness fruit being two sides of the same coin, I almost thought the same thing at one point about Ace's fruit and Luffy's fruit.
Oh.
Because Ace has fire, Luffy was, yes, he had the properties of rubber, but he is the sun god. But to have those two be one in the same would make a lot of sense to me. And then I thought about it and I was like, that means Sabo's getting murdered. And then I was like, I can't go down that rabbit hole. That'd be a little much for me. But it would make sense to have the strength of fire with the properties of rubber and everything that paints into the picture of who Joy Boy
of
is.
the sun god.
Yeah.
And that's really interesting because if you're actually thinking about it, if devil fruits are created from people's dreams, wouldn't devil fruits have like way more powers? Like I know that I've gone off of like the monkey's paw thing where I think it's like a devil fruit isn't exactly what you wish for, but let's say that it is, and somebody's like, well, I want to be able to be flames, and it's like, well, wouldn't you want more? Wouldn't you wish for more? Especially back then when your dreams weren't suppressed, where you actually had freedom. Wouldn't devil fruits have had so many more powers shoved into one? And maybe throughout the centuries, to stifle freedom, they were slashed in half. So now it's like, well, now you're constrained to this single power and you're hated by the sea. Therefore, you don't have the freedom as you did before, which could be another interesting route they could take.
Yeah, and it honestly, it's very interesting. I don't know if you watch My Hero Academia or read it, but something that they talk about a lot when it comes to quirks is that they grow through generations. So the person who had their original quirk when everyone started doing it, they were very, very minute quirks. And then over time, they've just gotten to this extent. Like, you know, Deku has All for One, which has multiple quirks. And originally, like, one of his quirks was Black Whip. And the original user said, like, oh, I used to only be able to, like, shoot one of these out. And then it was very slow and it didn't work very well. But over time, going from user to user, same thing with generations, it becomes more powerful, which would make sense why devil fruits should be way more overpowered, right?
Yeah.
Because the dream can only go up from there. Hey, I really want to be fire, you know, and then it's like, well, I really wish that I also could fly, you know, and then all of a sudden it's like, well, I also wish I could heal people. And then all of a sudden it's like you get to the point where you're like at Marco's fruit and you're like, wait, I can heal people, I'm fire, and I'm like a mythical bird. Like, it, you know, it should be something like that. But then some of these fruits are very, you know, basic. So it's like you would think that it would evolve over time because that's naturally how humans evolve. Their desire should grow. But if Emu is literally trying to stifle all of these dreams and basically have that power, it would make sense that they weren't able to go to the height that they originally would if people had the freedom to have dreams like they should.
Quite literally just stopping evolution, which would fit really well into Vegapunk's theory that devil fruits are the next evolution of humans because humans will constantly want to dream. But if Emu has the command of all things and is able to control basically what things do and stifle freedom that way, could even be pushing their command of all things out to other like all over, like how we kind of saw how Shanks did, where he was able to put his conquerors at a really wide area, like. It could be that, like, single-handedly stopping the evolution of humanity, the evolution of dreams, and stifling freedom.
Yeah.
So everything kind of is just circling back to that original point of, like, the breath of all things, the voice of all things, the command of all things. The three, maybe even original branches of hockey, which then splintered off into other people.
Yeah, and like that's why I really, when I was thinking of the command of all things, I was like there has to be this like new level of conquerors where you're able to submit someone to your will in a way that is just like so overbearing. Like, and I was like, that would be the only thing that would make sense to be able to keep everything in check the way things have been for so long. I'm like, it just doesn't make sense otherwise. And that's why I was like, it's got to be something. There has to be something there, whether it's a form of hockey or not. But like, it is very interesting to think that, and that to me would be the ultimate villain. It's like the person who literally just wants to maintain the status quo and make sure everyone is undertow. Like, that would be the ultimate villain to me.
Especially in One Piece, where the narrative has always been searching for freedom, having the freedom to do what you want, and also following your dreams. Like every time Luffy had picked up a straw hat, it was always to push them to accomplish their dreams and goals. Every time Luffy goes to an island, what does he do? He instills freedom into there. He brings the truth to light. In multiple islands, most of the time, like especially like if you bring up Alabaster, it was telling the truth about Crocodile. Dressrosa telling the truth about Doflamingo. Telling the truth to Ace in Marineford that he was loved, and for Ace to accept that truth that he deserved to live. I mean, as you go through telling Brooke the truth that Laboon is alive and reigniting his flame, telling Robin that she needs to tell the truth that she wants to live. Every single arc is about revealing the truth, and therefore you seek freedom. Doesn't it make sense that the Void Century is lost to history? Because if anybody found out that truth, you can't control people anymore.
Exactly.
And that might be what the end goal is.
Yeah, and I 100% agree. I think that it would be, and that just kind of circles back to why I think Rox didn't want to be king. I think that he just wanted freedom for everybody because he wanted to make sure that people were free to follow their dreams. And what I think is very interesting is the makeup of his crew. They all, now obviously we don't know as much about Shiki and the rest of his crew, but all of them have some form of dream that is very pure in like in its purest form, like to the point. And it would also make sense that he was kind of like a Joy Boy candidate in that way, because what did Kaido become obsessed with? Joy Boy. He thought he could be the Joy Boy that his captain wasn't, so he tried. He even went as far as to name his right hand man King, because all of the right hands have a form of king. We have the King of Hell, we have the Dark King, we have, you know, all the symbolism that leads us to believe that Kaido was trying so hard to be the candidate of Joy Boy, but could never obtain it because he maybe didn't have the purest of intentions behind it. So it's like, and then Whitebeard, he just wanted a family. Big Mom has probably one of the purest dreams. She just has poor execution when it comes to it. And what I think is really interesting, and something that I really wish to happen, I don't think it's going to happen, but I really wish to happen, is I wish Big Mom would eventually die and give her fruit to Nami. Because I see the parallel in them so much so. And honestly, it makes me like Big Mom more, because I could see Nami becoming a cold-hearted person if she never met Luffy. She was already to that point. She was willing to betray anybody for money to try and get the freedom of her village, to take care of these people. And she has a thing for children, just like Big Mom, you know, and I could see like the parallels between Big Mom and Nami are very, very, very well done. And that's why I think that the makeup of Rox's crew is just so good at the way that they mirror Luffy's crew now. Like even things like titles. You have the world's strongest man, the world's strongest creature, and then you have Big Mom, who's like literally the strongest female in the show. Like all of these characters could have been Straw Hats at one point. And if they lost their captain, like Zoro was a bounty hunter. He was ruthless. People knew that he was ruthless. Like he would do whatever for a bounty. You know, Nami was ruthless too. She was willing to betray anybody, tell anybody what they needed to know, so that way she could betray them to further her goal. Sanji had a legitimate dream, but if he never met Zeph, or if he lost Luffy, he could have become cold-hearted just like the rest of his siblings. Like,
yeah.
The thing is, and it's very interesting because, you know, in things like Batman and stuff like that, it's like, you know, the Joker always says to Batman, like, oh, you're one bad day away from being me. And it's like, that's true for these characters. All of Luffy's crew is one bad day away from being Rox's crew, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree 100%.
So, I don't know. I don't know if they're going to do it, because, like, honestly, Rox is being played up as this evil person. But something that's very interesting is, first off, he has the D in his name, but every time we see him, he's smiling, or it looks like he's laughing. So it's like, it almost is painted.
Really that evil? Like, and here's the thing, like the only people who tell us that he's truly evil has been who? The world government. Like, are we actually going to take their word for it, considering what they say about Luffy, what they say about all pirates in general? Like, how Akainu basically states that every pirate is evil and must be taken out regardless of what they do. What happened to the Rumbar pirates, who literally were just like a musical band of pirates who got a bounty on them for some reason? Why? Because music is freedom. It is freedom of expression. And I also think it's one of the reasons why Big Sake is so important, because it is the truest freedom is to be a pirate. and it's like to romanticize, to sing this so that children sing this and start having dreams and aspirations. Like, you have to silence that. Like, the Rumbar Pirates, in all honesty, aren't pirates. Why are they called pirates? To bring a smile to every child, is that actually something that's bad? To the world government, yes, because it instills freedom and dreams. Ugh.
Yeah, and that's why it's so interesting that Oda loves to use music in his writing. You know, the drums of liberation. You know, the music is such a freeing experience for people, and it does let them think out of the box and talk about, you know, very vulnerable things. Even in our own society's music, you know, there's the freedom of expression that comes with telling a story through music, or to even share an experience of you know, something that you went through. Or it could just be as simple as a catchy melody that just makes you feel good, you know? So it's so interesting that a musical band of pirates would be so hated. And it is very interesting. I mean, even look at when he was just traveling during the time skip. He got, like, he was the Soul King. And what did they do? They immediately bum rushed the stage trying to get him. Like, it's not that big of a deal. It was just a concert. And he hadn't been actually being a pirate for over 2 years at that point. But what did they do? They tried to stop him immediately. He was one of the only Straw Hats that they were, like, actively pursuing at Sabaody when that was happening, that they knew of. Like, they were trying to take out the other, like, fake Straw Hats and whatnot, but they thought they were real. Yeah. But it was like,
specifically Luffy, though. Like, yeah. It was Luffy, and then it was Brook.
Yeah, and they sent literal, like, hordes of people into at the stage, and, like, the fans just had to hold them back, and they had the freedom to do so from hearing it. They were like, I'm not gonna let the government silence us that way. So it's just, it plays into, you know, all the things that we talked about. It's just like, if we were in the One Piece world and we heard about Luffy, just even from the jump, we were just like, man, he took out Arlong, he took out Don Krieg, he took out, you know, Crocodile. We don't hear any of the good exploits. We don't hear, like, wow, can you believe he liberated Alabasta? No, we're like, yo, that guy was terrible. He beat a warlord. Like, we would think that Luffy was scum. That's
yeah.
just, and that's what they would lead us to believe. So if you think, like, very rarely do we ever hear about a pirate that we haven't seen firsthand as scum and it be true.
Yeah.
So it's like, why would I believe the same thing when it comes to rocks?
They push the, like, Doflamingo and the warlords up as these wonderful people, when in reality most of them were terrible people. Like Jinbei, horrible, worse scum because he wasn't doing it, even though he was doing the right thing. Doflamingo was held up as this great person, right? Except he was, like, one of the worst people in One Piece, and it's like, at what point are we like, man, like, the world's government is clearly controlling the information. Like, they don't want certain information to go out. Didn't want the D to be in Luffy's name. Went after Morgan's for publishing stuff in the paper. Like, there's just a lot of stuff, man. It's interesting. It's real interesting.
Yeah, and it's like, we even Crocodile, like, in Alabasta, was held up as a hero of the people, but that's just because they didn't know the actual truth. And it was in that way that Crocodile was kind of almost forming his own world government inside Alabasta. And it was interesting because that was all of Baroque works, what they were thinking that they were doing. They were setting up a country for these people, and then, like, he literally was basically trying to mirror the structure of the world government with him being Eam at the top, because he said that anybody that was underneath him was going to get this high-ranking status underneath him, and then set it up like that. So it's like Crocodile was the one who was setting himself up on a smaller scale as the world government in Alabasta.
I agree.
So
was that foreshadowing? Could be.
I think so.
I don't put it past Oda, man. But yeah.
Yeah, it's just like there's so much stuff, and I honestly, I think Crocodile is way more important than a lot of people give him credit for. I think that he has, I don't know, I have a crazy theory about that.
We should definitely do another one where we specifically talk about the warlords and like the cross guilds and stuff.
Oh yeah,
Like
100%.
absolutely, because I do also have some I do also got some theories, but I feel like if we go on all of our theories, we'll be here for another 2 hours.
Probably. I mean, like, I feel like we've just scratched the surface, and like, but
Oh,
like we talked about so much. It's
we really
just,
did.
it's just
You're
so
definitely
much.
gonna have to clip some of this and like put it
Oh
on
yeah,
TikTok and like stuff because we talked about a ton, man.
yeah, we definitely did. Like it just even like talking about like the gods and stuff like that. I feel like you're right. I feel like we very much scratched the surface when it comes to god fruits. I think that more fruits are god fruits that we just don't know. And I think the reason for that is I think that awakenings play into that. And I think that,
Yeah,
if you, it can awaken your fruit in a way. Like, I think that Boa's fruit is way more important. And that's why Blackbeard was after it. Like, and it only makes sense that he would do that. And that's the same reason why I think that he originally went to Drum Island to find Chopper's fruit before Chopper got it.
oh, I
Because
see.
Blackbeard's very smart, and a lot of people don't really give him that credit, but I think he sees things down the road that of what things could be. Like
I agree.
he was even gonna go after Luffy, but then because Ace was there, he was like whatever, and he got hit by the knock upstream while they were trying to head to Skypiea. So like, I think that he was very strategically going after fruits that he knew had potential to be god fruits.
And if you think about Blackbeard, like Blackbeard would have never done what he did if he didn't get a specific devil fruit. He was specifically waiting for a certain devil fruit. Then on Jaya, what a perfect place to wait for a pirate with a very high bounty. Could he have possibly known that Ace was going after him? Probably yes. He's known Ace for a while, knew that Ace was probably chasing after him because of Thatch, and knew that Ace wouldn't listen to Whitebeard if Whitebeard told him no. So he had two options. One, convince Ace to join him, which he probably knew wouldn't work, but there's never any, there's no harm in trying. Or two, if it failed and he wasn't able to capture a pirate on Jaya, could have taken Ace. Always having contingency plans, always having backup plans. Like, did he mean to meet Luffy there? No, I think that was a coincidence of destiny. But it makes sense because they're so similar. Like, they're just really similar characters, and so it makes sense that they kind of go to very similar islands, have similar mindsets. But I do think that where they differ is that Blackbeard is a lot more goal oriented and focused. Like Luffy would have went out to sea regardless, but Blackbeard, he had a plan. He knows exactly what he wants. Like he's planned everything out, like, bit by bit.
That's why I almost thought that Ace and Luffy's fruits were two sides of the same coin. Because he originally was going after Luffy after he figured out who he was, but then he settled for Ace because it might have been one half of the coin. And then, when in Dressrosa, what did he do? He sent Burgess to get the Maramara fruit, but then once he couldn't get the Maramara fruit, who did he go after? Luffy, because he wanted that fruit. That would have been another side to the coin, and then they could have taken Sabo later. Like, there's just like, I originally did think that they were definitely both sides of the same coin, and they still very much could be. It could be playing into that, and we don't really know it yet. But I really, really would have enjoyed finding out that Luffy would have gotten Ace's fruit at the same time, and then it would have completed his devil fruit.
I see. Yeah, maybe it's too early for that. There's always a chance that Sabo does die. So
I know. I just don't think I could handle it.
I know I do like Sabo as a character, but this man has dodged death so many times. There's no way it won't catch up with him.
Yeah, and I don't know. I really hope that he doesn't die just because I really want him to be the one that puts Akainu in his place, but he could die after that.
Yeah, he could for
Like,
sure.
it just we just don't know. But yeah, I think that Blackbeard definitely has his eyes on god fruits. I just feel
I agree.
like that's the only reason, like, he's getting his people strong fruits that are just as comparable and have the almost fit them. But I think that for himself and like the higher echelon of his crew, he's looking for those strong fruits. And I think that's why he wanted Boas. I think deep down she has the Medusa fruit, but that's just me.
Could be, which could be like an offshoot of that. But yeah,
But all right. Well, we have talked very, very long. And of course, I would definitely want to do this again.
absolutely.
It's a little late. I'm an old man, so I usually go to bed probably in like an hour. But my sleep schedule's all messed up. So who knows how long I'll be up yet. But I've really enjoyed this. This has been amazing. I love your theories on TikTok, and that's why as soon as Larry was like, "Yo, we need to get more females in here," I'm like, I watch TikTok all the time. I'm like, I got a bunch here. I'm gonna send you all of them. So I'm glad that he reached out. I'm glad that you're part of this, and you're making such a good name for yourself in the community. Your theory video on YouTube is great, and all
Thank
of your
you.
theories and analysis on the chapters. Like, usually, like right after I wake up on Friday morning, I usually go check out Mosh, yours, and a few others, a chapter analysis before I put mine out.
You're way too kind, man. I appreciate it a ton. Your theories today genuinely blew my mind. I have a completely different perspective now, especially with that command of all things. You gotta make another video about that. Tag me in it, because that video, like that theory is fantastic, and there's so much evidence for it. But I also had a ton of fun. I would love to come back, dude. Like this was fun. Just theory crafting and stuff.
Yeah, and that's I think that's important in this space, because sometimes we get in our own echo chambers and we're like, this makes sense and stuff like that, and it's just so great to be able to bounce these ideas off people, because people have different opinions on these things, and then on top of that, it's like they might even give you more evidence to your point, and that's really important to me, because One Piece is so long. Sometimes you forget things in between. And it's like I could be thinking like, okay, yeah, I got, point A, B, and C, but then it's like, oh yeah, but like at the very end you forgot like X, Y, and Z are gonna be very important for the future. And it's like, oh man, so I just think that it's important to have these conversations, especially with like, even just in the Discord, it's great. So
It's fun.
yeah, it's definitely a lot of fun, and I look forward to doing more in your Discord as well. And I'm still working on mine. I need to get all the bots up and everything like that.
Hardest part.
Honestly,
Bots are the hardest part.
honestly, all this stuff is like, to me, it's hard, because like I would like to think I'm tech savvy, but like OBS and like everything is just so complicated. That's why I feel very at home at TikTok, because it's so easy.
So easy.
So
Yeah.
easy. I'm just like, why can't I just do it on my computer through this camera and everything just be cool? But it's like, now it's like I gotta write a script. I can't just hit like the back button and just like delete the last part. I gotta write a script. I gotta be on point. I gotta have visuals. And it's like, now I need to learn, editing software and everything. It's just like, it's a lot.
A lot.
It's a lot.
Yeah.
And then to make a Discord on top of that, it's like, but
Absolutely.
it is
ton of work,
a
but
lot of fun though. It's definitely like some of the most fun I've had. But yeah, so I put your link tree in the description so that everyone can definitely check you out on all forms of social media and join your awesome new Discord. But do you have anything else for us?
I don't think so. I think we covered a lot. This is great. Thank you for putting my link tree in. I super appreciate it. Always be plugging the Discord. I'm hoping to get that up and going so that we got a ton of people. But yeah,
All right. Well, thank you so much for doing this, and I look forward to the next time we do it. Maybe we can get someone else in here too, have just like a three-way conversation and get even more information out there. And who knows, that next chapter might be crazy, and then we'll be back to the drawing board again.
Chapter is crazy, but yeah, I had a ton of fun. I as soon as you want me back, I'll be back, man. It was great.
All right. We'll definitely have to set something up.
All right.
All right. Well, you have a wonderful night. Everyone in the chat, you guys have a wonderful night too. I hope you guys enjoyed us talking. I'm sure there will be plenty of more because, like I said, I could talk all night about this stuff. I'm pretty sure my wife's tired of hearing about it because we just got to Little Garden, so we got a while till we're at a theory crafting place there.
Oh my gosh.
So, all right. Thank you so much, and you have a wonderful night.